Hi, my name's Julian Stedman. I'm one of the lay ministers in the Crickhowell area. I'd like to welcome you to our home for the first programme of Jeremy and Julian on Wednesdays, a midweek online magazine for everyone in the St Catug ministry area. We intend to adopt an informal style for these programmes which will complement our Sunday services. To kick off, Jeremy is going to reflect on a topic that I think many of us will find relevant today. I'm sorry about the traffic noise, but it's the message that really matters. Over to you, Jeremy.
The grass below is pretty green now. The trees are putting out their new growth, their new leaves. Even this, it's got pale green shoots coming out of the leaves. It's definitely spring, well on the way. Life is bursting out of everything. Birds are building their nests. Flowers are coming out in the woods. But life in Gilwan is slightly muted. People are at home. It's more like a Sunday, but like an old-fashioned Sunday where people stayed at home and just looked after their gardens or sat in with their children. Because we're supposed to be isolated. We're supposed to be staying at home, keeping away from people. Now, many of us will feel this because a lot of what happens in our life is about people. We depend upon people. We need people. We need people in order to feel normal. Being isolated takes away a lot of the things which makes our lives feel meaningful, or feel valued, or feel purposeful. The connections we make with people give us a sense of who we are and of what we do. And therefore to not have that is a kind of loss. And if we have a loss, we'll feel it, and we will feel a kind of grief. And that feeling of loss, and that feeling of grief, is not a rational thing. That's why grief can often take highly organised and rational people by surprise. Because if that's the kind of person that one is used to making plans and fulfilling them. One's used to organising oneself. But grief will not be organised. A sense of loss will not be simply subject to a plan. And therefore the grieving process is not a rational process. It's not something which can be neatly boxed. It's not something which can be just ticked off. It's something which will happen irrespective of whether we would like it to happen. And it will happen in the way in which it wants to happen, not in the way we would like it to happen. The best way that we can prepare for this is to recognise it for what it is. That it is not something unwholesome as such. It's not something wrong, and it's not something somehow demeaning or degrading. It is in fact part of being alive. And if we're alive, the things we lose will register in our hearts, our souls, our spirits, and our minds. And as we register that loss, we will grieve. To a greater or lesser extent, for anything which we lose. That sense of pang at losing a hand of cards is a kind of grief, although quite a short one. How much more is the loss of one who we truly love? And somewhere in the middle of this is the loss of our interactions with our neighbours, with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, with everyone with whom we normally meet. It is natural that we should feel this loss. The best way we can prepare for it is to simply recognise that it is happening and to let it happen. If we fight against it, we will not be helped. and we might end up injuring ourselves. It will not make it simply go away. When Jesus was on the cross, the Gospels record he cried out, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which is Aramaic. It's a paraphrase from Psalm 22, which in English renders, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now the apostles were keen to record all these things because they wanted to show that Jesus fulfilled the law and the prophets. That is why we have 4 readings on a Sunday, that we have the completeness of the teaching of the apostles and the epistles and the Gospels, and we have the law and the prophets. We have the Psalms, the readings from Genesis, from Exodus, from Isaiah, or whatever other books of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. And so the apostles wanted us to know that Jesus had fulfilled the Scriptures. Therefore they recorded these things deliberately. They deliberately recorded those words from Psalm 22 to show that Jesus was fulfilling them, even as he spoke, even as he hung there on the cross. And when Jesus said them, a part of him would have recognized that he was fulfilling the Scriptures, and therefore that he would do them, because he knew that that was what his job was, to fulfill the Scriptures. That was the Father's will and purpose for him. And as he said, he came to fulfill the purpose of the one who sent him, the Father, our Father, who is in heaven. But also when he cried those things out, he cried them out because he was in terrible anguish. He was in pain. He was subject to horror and to grief, to sadness and to pain in a way that we can hardly imagine. We can imagine a little bit because all of us have felt these things at some time, and therefore a part of it is the same as for us. But a part of it we cannot imagine because he is the Son of God, and the things which we understand were not only represented in him, but they were magnified in him. Because whereas we have never known what it means to be the Son of God as he is, whereas we were born alienated from God and from creation, and whereas that is our normal experience of life, Jesus was born in fellowship with the Father. He never knew what it was like to not be with his Father. For him, he was never alienated from his Father. He was wholly good. And the evil which to us is normal, which is background noise, which is just part of reality, was for him something new and strange, because he was from heaven. And therefore, just as he knew goodness which we have never known, goodness which we cannot imagine, goodness which we have never experienced, by contrast, he also knew evil which we have never known, which we cannot imagine, because he plumbed to the depths of evil, even as he had previously known the heights of goodness. And when he cried out in pain, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," it was the cry of a man experiencing these things. It was the cry of the Son of God experiencing these things. But as we feel fear and grief and sorrow and horror, we can know that Jesus has known these things too. He was there. And therefore we can know that he shares these things with us. That as we experience grief and pain and sorrow and horror, he knows it because he was there. But this doesn't just work in one direction. As we experience these things, we realize more of what Jesus knew. We understand better his suffering, his passion, and therefore we understand better what he has done. And therefore, in a peculiar, mysterious and profound way, we actually can have fellowship with him in pain and fear and sorrow and horror. The fellowship of suffering. For he suffered as we suffer, and therefore he shares it with us. And as he has done this, when we suffer, we can suffer with him, alongside him, as he suffered on our behalf. And many times over history have the Lord's friends, people who have known the Lord, people who have been holy, people who have been godly, people who have walked with him, they have shared this testimony of the fellowship of suffering which they have known. And in some ways this is the most profound and the most deep and the most meaningful fellowship we shall have with our Lord until we meet him in the flesh. And therefore, whatever we are going through, however terrible it seems, we can know that he is with us and that we are with him and that we share this fellowship with him as we go forward through life with all that that means to us.